Hey guys, it's Liv here. In today's video, I want to go over my run from Charlotte Regionals. If you guys enjoy and you want to see some more content like this, of course, like and subscribe and answer the comment question of the day. What is your favorite tournament run that you've ever done? This can be online, in person, VGC, singles, whatever it is. Just let me know your favorite run down below. I'd love to hear some of your guys' stories. With that said, though, I do want to really quickly preface that this team, it went 6-3, which is pretty incredible. I got a lot of help, of course. I hired Paul Ruiz through the Metafy stuff, but obviously Paul also does independent coaching now. Just at the time, from what I was aware, it was only through Metafy. But I did hire Paul. Paul was an incredible coach, helped me a lot with my run. So I'm going to link Paul's stuff down below in case if for some reason anyone else here wants to book a session. Paul's help was truly incredible. I thought the most valuable aspect personally was trying to get an outside set of eyes on my play, someone who was unfamiliar with how I approached games, and hopefully could just obviously critique how I was going about stuff, help me build more towards a VGC side of things than towards singles, though I wasn't really great at building for singles anyway, and just help overall with improving how I went about looking at the game in general. While obviously I understand that it's not going to be for everyone, and not everyone has the money to put down for coaching, for anyone who is interested in looking towards that avenue of play, I would recommend Paul. I thought I had a good run, and despite the fact that I felt really uncomfortable with my team, specifically on the last day, I did not tell Paul that I felt uncomfortable with my team because during the sessions, I felt fine with it. But I got a lot of nerves right before the event, literally hours before. And I do want to break that down because I think it's also interesting to see where I went with the team after Paul, and how I got to my solutions on my own that ended up fixing my concerns. So I think that in general, all of that will obviously help to show where I needed the help, where I went to, and then what I did on my own and how I performed at the run. So with that said, let's get started. I think the best place to start, of course, is with the team that Paul and I came with together. So a lot of these spreads were Paul's, and I do really appreciate the help because I wasn't sure. One of the biggest concerns I had going into this was what to really value in terms of my investments. And one of the first things that Paul had suggested was this particular talent flame. This was a talent flame that Paul was running a lot at different events, or at the very least he said that this was the talent flame that he was valuing. This has 252 speed, obviously, just to max pace, outpace other talent flames, or at least tie them. You have the 20 in attack, which I believe the 20 in attack was just leftover investment. With the 220 HP and 12 speed F, this was designed to take a modest choice specs Fluttermane Shadow Ball from full. Now this really just means that if Fluttermane is the lead with the slower Pokemon, that I can always at least get off a hit guaranteed for a last ditch Tailwind. Which does help because obviously since we are not Focus Sash, since we do have the Clover Cloak instead, that's obviously a very good way to guarantee up a Tailwind still, since unless if they're leading specifically with Bundle Fluttermane, that's typically not going to get off first. And even still, I should say this really only matters actually if I'm not going to be clicking Tailwind first and I want to click it on the second turn, which even still is a very uncommon situation. Essentially, for that to happen, I would need to lead off with like Bundle Talonflame, go for like an Icy Wind plus like a Will-O-Wisp, and then have that happen. But even still, this can also lead to something like a Last Ditch Flame Will-O-Wisp, or like a Last Ditch Brave Bird, or even like a Taunt on a last turn, which overall, those all help with Talonflame a lot. They're all very valuable assets to click. Regardless though, the investment was really worth it because I found that a lot of Fluttermanes were just outright targeting my Talonflame. So this was a situation that actually came up a lot in the event too, where this investment was incredibly useful. One of the other things that this helps with in general is the fact that Talonflame can actually be rolled to take a hit from Terraflying Roaring Moon, specifically if this is a speed boosting Roaring Moon, which was something that Paul and I were very concerned with. We thought that a lot of Roaring Moon were going to opt for more bulky and speed boosting sets to go for fast Tailwinds, because it's a lot bulkier of a Tailwind setter than Talonflame was. So by going for the Terraflying Acrobatics, it actually cannot guarantee the KO without an attack Photosynthesis. So I thought, oh, actually, never mind. This is the attack Photosynthesis. It's specifically the non-attack boosting one that we actually guarantee take. And attack boosting, it's a roll. It's 56% chance to OHKO, but it is still really important that Talonflame can even take this hit to begin with, as this could lead to a Will-O-Wisp on the following turn. So obviously, really important that Talonflame is making sure to hit these benchmarks. Overall, though, this Talonflame was definitely a focal point of the team. I did change it a little bit in the progression of the team, though, with and without Paul's help. So I'll go into that in a little bit. We do have Garchomp up next. Garchomp was actually the only one that never actually changed. Everything else changed in some minor way, shape, or form at one point or another, but Garchomp never did. I did test Clear Amulet. I did not end up going with it though. Though I will say that ended up getting ingrained in my head that I was Clear Amulet at the event, which I can go over in a little bit. But overall, This Garchomp was incredible. It was a great damage breaker, and one of the biggest benefits to Garchomp came down to the fact that this actually outpaces Booster Bundle. When I was building the team with Paul, I did mention I wanted to build around Talonflame. I thought the Talonflame was going to be something that I could play really well, as at the time I was playing for really offensive teams, and this seemed like the flagship offensive core. It was top cutting events really well, and consistently too. There was multiple Talon Tusk teams that did really well, and that group of people who built it were all doing really well with it. So I thought that Talonflame seemed interesting. And Paul had actually asked if I wanted to do Garchomp. The biggest benefit to Garchomp was the speed. With this, I could outpace Booster Bundle. That's one of the only things that Great Tusk cannot outpace in the format with that Tailwind up, besides, of course, other Tailwind teams. Garchomp does have a little bit of other benefits here. Obviously, it's a little bit bulkier on the SPF side, which is great with Terra. And overall, Garchomp just hits really hard. The biggest downside to Garchomp is obviously lacking Headlong Rush, but in every other aspect, Garchomp is actually an incredible pick. With Rock Slide, I was able to get really good dual flinches off. I was able to even just break Focus Sashes really easily with this mon. Dragon Claw is great for stuff like Roaring Moon, and it forced Terra a lot on these really bulky dragons, which is great because a lot of them were typically going for Terra Flying, which was useful for my later aspects of this team. We have Earthquake, which is a great partnership with not only Talonflame, but at the time we also had a Dragonite and a Terra Flying King Gambit on the team. Terra Flying King Gambit did stay, Dragonite did not though. But with these, Earthquake is actually very spammable against a lot of different matchups. And overall, I think that Garchomp was an incredible asset to this team. Fluttermane's up next. This spread is honestly just designed to creep 110s. We figured that a lot of Roaring Moons were going to go with speed boosting, as I mentioned earlier. And it was something that, despite the fact that we hadn't seen a lot of speed boosting, we've seen more leaning towards attack, or at least it was a close 50-50 there. We figured that speed boosting was going to be the better option going into Charlotte. And I'm really glad that I did prepare for that, because I think that ultimately a lot of Moons seem to be going with more so speed boosting from at least what I was able to see. With the Moonblast, it's a great single target option with Shadow Ball as well. Energy Ball, we figured was great for stuff like ground types that Garchomp might struggle a little bit against, like Great Tusk, where you can't really do that immediate damage, as well as for stuff like Dazzling Gleam being a great spread option. Typically on these Tailwind teams, you want a really good just choice mon that's going to hit really hard for spread options. This is typically why in Series 1 you saw a lot of Goldango with Murkrow. It was a really good core for that reason. Or maybe like Heatwave Volcarona with that core. In this case, that team happens to be having Choice Specs Fluttermane. With the Modest 116, this is actually just specifically for a stat bump. If you go down to 108, you hit 185, but with the Modest nature, you hit 187 actually by just going with another 8 investment. So this is what Paul and I decided to invest for here. With the 52 HP plus 1, I think it was 140 actually in the Fizz Def. This was designed to take Adamant Wild Charge from Iron Hands. If we got on 136 to roll with 140, it's guaranteed. And since we needed 4 in SPF anyway, and we didn't really have a SPF calc, we actually just decided to throw the other 8 into Fizz Def. This was mostly designed to just try and see if maybe some other fringe hit that was boosting, like an attack boosting booster energy, Iron Hands, or really just, well, less so attack boosting. It's really attack boosting, it's not max actually, or really just any other random physical hit. Well, we might be able to take the roll slightly better. We didn't really need the special attack for anything. It didn't really benefit us going to 124. The speed was kind of worthless unless we specifically wanted to creep Screamtail, which I guess in hindsight, actually, that might have been something to creep. But the counterpoint to that is that almost every Screamtail was actually running booster energy at the time, unless they were not going with max speed. So not really something that we are concerned with either here. But ultimately, though, we just figured throw it in the Fizz Def. There might have been something else that we talked about in call, but I can't actually find notes of this, where the 148 mattered versus 140, but I know the 140 was at least for Iron Hands, so ultimately this was really good. Terra Fairy was the type that I had personally decided. Paul also suggested a defensive one like Steel, or maybe with like a Grass or something, to help with Garchomp Earthquakes, and it was something I did consider actually, going with the Grass specifically for Garchomp Earthquake spamming, giving it another partner, especially as the team did adapt later on to lose one of my Flying type mons, but ultimately I did like Fairy. It was really good for just getting high damage, and it was great to just OHKO a lot of neutral Pokemon with Moonblast, so we kept the Fluttermane just as is, pretty much. We did change Energy Ball later on for Thunderbolt, but overall, not a lot really changed otherwise on this mod. Iron Bundle. So the Iron Bundle was interesting, actually. Typically, I actually was going to be thinking to just go with 252, 4, 252, because the 4 is investing in the weaker defense stat, and then obviously just bundle for damage. But Paul had an interesting thought. One of the things that Paul had found out was that with 68 SPF and 20 HP, you can actually take a Sash Fluttermane hit going for, specifically, I believe this was for Moonblast. Yeah, it's for Moonblast. So it's specifically for Sash Fluttermane Moonblast, which is actually kind of insane. It's essentially a built-in Sash versus one of the Pokemon that you would typically be finding on lead as well as bundle. So I thought that was a very important calc that this did provide. With the Terra Ice, of course, the game plan was just to boost with offensive Terra with Freeze Dry and make it do more damage, because that was the attack I thought we would primarily be clicking. Paul did suggest a couple other options such as Hydro Pump. Well, obviously Hydro Pump was something that we considered highly at the time, but also Protect or Encore in that slot. Encore bundle was coming up a lot, and I did actually see a lot of bundles even just ditching Hydro Pump entirely, which I kind of wish I did. I didn't fight a lot of mons that I really felt like Hydro Pump was a necessary click for, and I kind of just clicked it out of convenience of having it, but I don't think that my game plan would have changed a lot without Hydro Pump. And truthfully, having Encore here could have actually been really useful for a lot of setup options, or maybe even stuff going for Taunt or Protect. So I kind of wish I did that in hindsight, but overall, it wasn't really something that either of us kind of thought to do. Paul did suggest Encore in general. I didn't really feel comfortable ditching it, but I kind of wish that I did after seeing it at Orlando. Though I think that, to be honest, even if Paul did suggest ditching Hydro Pump for Encore, I wouldn't have done it. Just because that was how I saw so many bundles being ran, and it was a lot of a perspective thing. But in hindsight, though, a lot of my matches, I never really needed it, and I could have changed the game plan to make Encore work. And I think that's something I should have done, and I should have considered the fact that, just like with Orlando, my tournament experience was very different from my online play experience, and that maybe it was something that could have changed my game plan a lot, or maybe at least forced me to think on my feet a little bit better about just what I could have done. I'm going to go over Dragonite next. Now, Dragonite did not make the final team. However, I did almost consider bringing Dragonite yet again at the final days of the build. This ended up almost changing to Tailwind, and otherwise I was just going to probably copy-paste the same exact spread, with the Lumberry just being really good to avoid burns. With Tailwind, we could have had another way of boosting speed over Talonflame, and the reason why this ended up becoming a Tailwind mon was because we actually changed Dragonite's spot for something else entirely. So, definitely a little bit of a contentious spot here. I think a Dragonite's presence was very strong. Obviously, with Terra Blast flying, it was a really great way to break grasses for Garchomp. Ice Spinner as well was a great way outside of Terra to do so, as well as pressure stuff like Great Tusk a little bit easier. And even it was a great way to remove terrain for our trigger matchup. Overall, this Dragonite was really valuable, and the speed on this was to creep Adamant Tyranitar, which was pretty useful. While we can't really touch Tyranitar pre-Terra, at the very least post-Terra, they have almost always been going for flying this whole format. So having Ice Spinner to do a lot of really strong damage to Terra Flying T-Tar was really valuable here, as it was a strong way for Tyranitar to get around the Earthquake from Garchomp. So these two were a really good offensive core next to each other, and they provided a lot of good synergy despite being dual dragon. The final mon of the team is King Gambit. Now, this is a Terra Flying King Gambit with the Spadef investment. This was designed to actually be taking Torkoal Eruption with Charcoal Torkoal, even if we did not Terra. Now, that's a very important calc, actually, because I was not fighting a lot of Torkoal that were partnered with Helping Hand mons. I know it was a thing that was being ran, but typically the teams were not playing it that way. Which was really helpful because in almost every situation, my King Gambit actually ended up guaranteed taking this hit. And I knew for a fact going into games that unless they were Specs Torkoal, they could never KO me, which meant that my King Gambit had a really strong way to break down a lot of Torkoal HP, which meant that mons like Garchomp had a better chance at KOing it in the later portions of the match. Overall, this King Gambit was a game changer, and having Terra Flying as well meant that I had another Earthquake immunity on this team, which meant that my Garchomp's time going for Earthquakes was really valuable here. Now, this was the initial team, and a couple things that I came up with that I thought were really issues as far as matchups. For one, I kept losing to Dondozo. I thought that I would have a really good matchup against it with obviously the bundle as well as Energy Ball Fluttermane, but I found that a lot of Dozo teams were beating me anyway. So I had actually opted to, on my own time, try and load on Brute Bonnet. Now, this Brute Bonnet was definitely actually really bad. I had the speed to creep bundle, and then I went with Spadef loading plus HP to try and, I forget what the specific role was, but it was just some sort of special mon. I think it was for either Fluttermane or bundle to try and help with rolls. But overall, this ended up getting scrapped. I went with this as well with the AV Dragonite. I ditched Tailwind for Brick Break. Not Tailwind, Dragonites for Brick Break. Essentially, the logic here was to make this thing Spadef bulkier for stuff like Armor and DD. And I also had Brick Break, which is great for opposing screens because I was having a little bit of issue with screens. Though, truthfully, I think it was just the fact that I was not respecting the screen setters enough, which was important because overall, the screen setters, I just kind of thought were passive slots, but they're actually pretty damning. If you let the screen setters keep getting up screens, it's going to make your match harder, and I had ways of killing them. Usually I was leading Fluttermane, I just never targeted into it. And it was the difference quite literally between clicking Terra Fairy Gleam and just clicking Moonblast without Terra. And I think that in hindsight, if I clicked Terra Fairy Gleam a lot more against those screen teams, I would have been fine anyway. And I wouldn't have even needed to make this change to begin with. That's why I called this one the bonnet mistake, but overall it was. One of the things that I did decide on, though, that helped a lot with my matchup was actually ditching Dragonite. My team was extremely Ice Weak, and by ditching Dragonite for Abomasnow, I actually thought that this was going to be a very successful partner. And it was, actually. This was the only change I made on this version of the build, but I actually suggested it, and Paul thought it was a pretty incredible idea. So I really felt comfortable with this mon. I ran this thing a lot in practice games. I ran this a lot on ladder. At the time, actually, I was recording a couple of Abomasnow videos in general, and I thought it still had a lot of potential in this format. Paul did suggest Helping Hand, which I thought was a really good idea because my team actually lacks setup, and having stuff like Helping Hand plus Garchomp was really incredible. It helped a lot with damage output, especially with boosting Fluttermane and bundle damage. These two were fairly impossible to actually take hits from with Helping Hand and Abomasnow, and I really did feel confident in this team. I think the Helping Hand was a little bit better in most matchups. However, it was specifically the matchups I was still losing to that I kind of had to get rid of it, which is a little unfortunate, but it is what it is. We went with Light Clay on Abomasnow. This was designed to try and help Veil turns. Never really came up because Veil was never really up for more than 5 games at a time, 5 turns at a time on ladder, besides against Dozos. And I think it's something that I did kind of disregard a little bit. I should have probably valued the Light Clay a little more, as I think in tournament it mattered a lot, but I don't think it mattered enough to where I really hated the change that we made later on. With Terra Water here, really just a good defensive Terra option. This helps a lot with taking fire hits, and it also just patches up a lot of weaknesses. Now, I do obviously want to acknowledge that with Terra, with the ice typing in general, that Abomasnow does have a lot better Fizz Def. This was mostly designed to take on special attackers though, like Armarouge, Goldengo, etc., that we were taking a lot of different hits from. With the Terra Water especially, this actually made Abomasnow into one of my best Terra mons in a lot of games. Really, the only things I terraed more were Fluttermane and Garchomp. I didn't really terra anything else besides the occasional Fake Out bundle lead with Hands plus Bundle, which I did actually always use a Terra Ghost with Talonflame for, but otherwise I never really terraed Talonflame. King Gambit wasn't really getting Terra usage at the time, because I typically just found a lot more value in just not terraing King Gambit due to how much Bundle I was fighting. And then Bundle, I never actually terraed in almost every game, and every time I did terra Bundle, I was losing. It was specifically actually the reason I lost. So that's one of the things that I did keep in mind going into the quote-unquote final version of the team, going into my end of coaching. Now, this is the final team that Paul and I came up with, and I did kind of butcher this a lot in other renditions of the team I made later on, but I'll go into that in a bit. The first thing, though, that we changed was the Talonflame hit. Now, Paul and I didn't realize that we were actually very close to a benchmark that allowed us to actually guarantee take a hit with the Talonflame. Now, if I remember correctly, this was specifically to make the Palafin hero, well, the Palafin Zero form, so it could never actually KO Terra Water Jet Punch, which was actually really incredible for just making sure that we did not die to just in general to Palafin, because Palafin was actually leading a lot here, and with the 200 HP plus 28, yeah, this essentially was to, oh, that's not the right roll. I'm not sure why. Maybe this was for Palafin Hero without Terastal. No, it definitely was not for that. Yeah, so it's pretty much a near guaranteed. It's like a 6.3% chance. Still a really valuable role to have. It wasn't really something that we could have afforded to take other investment out of, though, other than, I guess, ditching the speed. But at the very least, we did change this to a pretty low chance to KO. Essentially, it needed a max roll to KO at any point. I was under the impression going into the event that it was actually a guaranteed live. But regardless, though, that's still incredible because it was either an 18% chance to KO, well, actually, just about 19% chance to KO. Because it had 3 different rolls to KO, whereas with just the 228 investment, it went down to 1. Which matters a lot, actually, because I was actually wasting 20 investment into here, as well as the 12 investment for the Shadow Ball didn't really matter, and this is still a nice compromise, because despite losing a lot of the time to Palafin, I went from only losing on 1 roll to Palafin and only on 1 roll to Fluttermane, which I thought was a decent way to kind of middle ground this. But overall, otherwise, Talonflame didn't really change on this version of the team. Garchomp, as I said, never changed. Fluttermane, we changed Thunderbolt over here, mostly just because of the fact that at the time I was fighting a lot of Terra Flying Dozo, as well as other types that Thunderbolt was really appreciated for. This was also appreciated just for other bulky waters, stuff like Terra Water or Abomasnow, which I thought at least that was really good. I didn't know if this was really a meta call or not, but I felt a lot of confidence in it. But a couple of the biggest mons that this was really useful for were Terra Flying Roaring Moon and for Terra Flying Tyranitar. This essentially gave Fluttermane a really strong way to hit both these Pokemon once they have revealed Terra, and it made sure that I was doing more damage than I was going to click with Moonblast. I felt like that with having this option on my team, this was a lot more of a way for Fluttermane to actually really get prediction heavy, and I benefited a lot from this actually. In a lot of my practice games, I was really aggressive, and it paid off a lot for my end games, just killing off the Terra Flying option on my opponent's team that would have otherwise put a lot of pressure on my build, such as Tyranitar especially. Moving on to the bundle, the only change we actually made here was making this Terra Ghost. I found this actually incredibly useful because it opened up a bundle Fluttermane lead a lot more. When I was reviewing footage with Paul actually through my replays, I realized that there was a lot of times I was leading off with Talonflame actually to click Will-O-Wisp. And this actually becomes very important later on, because a lot of the games that I led Talonflame with Will-O-Wisp, I actually choked really badly, because my intention was to do stuff like burn Palafin or Iron Hands, when in reality I should have never actually led it to begin with, because they were teams where I would have actually benefited significantly more from going with the Icy Wind Bundle. And Icy Wind Bundle proved actually to fix a lot of my corrections. Specifically, relying on it more was what fixed my team, because it was here the whole time and I just never really utilized it properly. But it essentially gave me a second lead by going with the Terra Ghost, whereas if I led off with Bundle and Fluttermane before, I would have always been forced to click Protect on fake out leads, or I would have lost Bundle. So this was actually a huge fix into my play. It also gave me a fighting immunity into Iron Hands, because typically they were going for Drain Punch to try and recover back whatever damage I did to them, while they would also then go for like a Terra Grass or something. So I made sure to obviously make this play, and it helped a lot with just beating the shit out of Terra Grass hands. So I'm very, very glad that this overall ended up working out for me. This bundle was a huge game saver in my runs, and I genuinely do not think I would have even went positive without it. Moving on to Abomasnow, we actually ditched 16 HP for the speed. We've realized that this was actually very valuable, specifically for Arm Rouge, because 0 investment, not Quiet Nature Arm Rouge was actually speed tying us, and that's a pretty big problem when I'm trying to get off good damage against it with Blizzard, because it could just go for Expanding Force and KO us. Specifically, if it was banking on not a Trick Room build of Arm Rouge and just going for like a really bulky build that was trying to outpace other builds of Arm Rouge without Trick Room up. So this was something we fought a little bit on ladder as well as in practice, and it was a really silly mistake to keep losing to, because we weren't really going to try and aim to underpace, because we wanted to actually creep stuff like Tyranitar instead. At least common Tyranitar builds that were going with like a low bulk. There was a couple other things as well that we were trying to creep with the Abomasnow, but I've sadly lost the notes on those speed creeps, so I'm kind of forgetting them. But overall, it was really important for the Arm Rouge, and that's specifically what the 97 hit. It was anything that would have respected creeping 0 speed Arm Rouge. We have now crept that with Abomasnow, which is really valuable. Essentially, we also ended up going with Earth Power on this build, which was really helpful as well. This creeps max speed Jolly Dozo too, which is another thing, because we were fighting a couple Jolly Dozos in exhibition and I was losing pretty badly to them, but making sure that I could actually guarantee outpace them if we just got Tailwind up or went for like -2 here. All of these were really valuable aspects, and even with this I was actually able to creep a lot of stuff like Meowscarada, which was really good in Tailwind, or Roaring Moon without booster speed, which is incredible in Tailwind. And this Abomasnow just in general put in so much. In fact, actually that's what the creep was for. It's for not speed boosting Roaring Moon. That's specifically, I'm remembering now. The point being though is that we are so close to a perfect speed creep, and then I think that this change truthfully fixed a lot of my issues. So I'm really glad that we did end up making it. The final thing we threw on here was Low Kick. Now, I was not ever really clicking Terra Blast. The one exception was specifically in Amoonguss matchups, but I had a lot of other ways to KO anyway with stuff like Abomasnow on the team now, so I was really not that concerned. And Terra Flying King Gambit was mostly a defensive play to try and take on Garchomp hits better, as well as Great Tusk. So I went with Low Kick, because I was losing a lot to Tyranitar pre-Terra actually, as my only real means of damaging it was Garchomp. And with the Low Kick King Gambit actually, I could force a Terra on Tyranitar and then beat it with my Abomasnow plus Bundle late game, which was actually a much better way of handling it than I was doing before. And this Low Kick change helped significantly. It actually fixed a lot of my team issues, and overall I think it's helped a lot with my King Gambit, just specifically for what my team needed. Now if I was really weak to stuff like Amoonguss still, then Terra Blast would have been a very valuable option to keep here, but I wasn't really fearing that matchup. Also, I forget when we did it, but at some point down the line, we actually made King Gambit Brave 0 attack. There wasn't really any reason to keep it at neutral, but ultimately, this was something that I valued at the time, just making sure I was the slowest thing in Trick Room, though this actually does change again. I go with the max speed IVs and then Brave Nature to specifically creep underneath Arm Rouge, but maybe outside of Trick Room creeping the low speed King Gambit so I can low kick them first. So I thought this was a nice middle ground play. It also helps with Garganacl creeping, because I was realizing that I was actually slower than Garganacl, which is really bad for Terra Ghost matchups, because while I could not Oko Garganacl with the Kowtow Cleave, at the very least if I could pressure it with Fluttermane, I could actually pressure it into never getting a recover turn before it can Salt Cure me and stall me out. So I thought that making sure I can creep Garganacl was an essential creep, and this 0 speed actually did change to 31 in a later build. Now, speaking of that, this was around the time where I actually made that change. I forgot to mark it on here, but this is where I actually made the change. Nothing else really changed on this team besides the fact that I went with Clear Emmet, Garchomp, Life Orb, Abomasnow because I had the Life Orb freed, and I threw on Volcarona. Now, my game plan here was essentially to try and make sure that I was not losing to Corviknight anymore. This was right around when I started panicking with the team, because right after my coaching session with Paul, I flew out to Charlotte within a few hours. And when I got to Charlotte, I was hanging out with my friend John, and while we were waiting for going out to dinner, I was doing a bit of showdown sets. In about 12 different games I did on showdown at around the 1500 mark, I fought about 7 or 8 different Corviknights. Now, when my team cannot beat Corviknight properly, this was a pretty big problem, and it was something that I actually extremely valued with my matchups. I thought that as well, throwing on Rage Powder for Volcarona was going to be useful for redirection, though I did not actually end up taking advantage of this to go with Sword Stance on Garchomp. I did try it, I felt like I wasn't really clicking it, and I didn't know what offensive move to get rid of, so I just didn't go with it. But I had Rage Powder still. This helped a lot with Garchomp getting off multiple hits against single target mons like Fluttermane that was locked into choice moves. We also had Overheat, which is great for Steel Dozo, which was something else I was losing to, and Struggle Bug was really valuable just for dropping armor special attack. This was quite literally, in case you didn't recognize it, the exact set that Freeze ran on his first team for Orlando, and I just copy pasted that because truthfully I didn't know what I actually wanted to run, and Tailwind was something I was looking into, and it was actually specifically his team recap that made me want to try this mon. It did not help at all. I can totally see why it would have worked on his team. Did not help my team at all. It was something that helped in every single matchup that I fought a Corviknight, and every other matchup it did worse. I'd actually made it so where I was almost never clicking Tailwind unless it was against Dozo Giri, but even still I never actually could beat Terra Steel Dozo. So I actually changed this. I called about, I shit you not, 20 different people. I called everyone who plays singles, doubles, everyone in my Discord contacts essentially who was online, I called them. Got no ideas until I called my friend Kurt. And I think Kurt jokingly suggested this, but it unironically paid off really well in mocks, where I went with Terra Dark. Well, Kurt didn't suggest a Terra, but I went with Terra Dark because I lost a side spam once, and I figured I could have avoided that by just encoring it into Expanding Force, and then went for Pterodox Salazzle plus King Gambit, and then massacred the core that way. But I had Fake Out, Encore, T-Spikes, and Overheat. Now this was a great way, not only around my Corviknight matchup, because I was able to go for Overheat spam and do a little more damage than Talonflame was going to, while giving up some of the offensive Volcarona had, but I also had Oblivious. Now I'm going to be completely honest, I only took the idea seriously because I thought it ignored Fake Out. It did not, and I learned that very later, which is why I then doubted the suggestion to begin with, but it was still very helpful nonetheless. This is still a great option for my team. With the speed, we were actually creeping a lot of stuff like Valiant, 110s like Iron Moth specifically, but it didn't really matter as long as my Sash was not getting broken. And this helped with T-Spikes to try and get them up for Dozo matchups, specifically Dozo without Glimora, because a lot of teams with Glimora were obviously just switching it in and getting rid of my T-Spikes. I was also able to encore a lot of stuff into like subs or protects, and it gave me the encore that I missed on bundle. And I think it's here where I actually should have made the change to encore over Hydro Pump on my bundle. And I think that would have helped a lot with just my team, and it would have made the same solution but better. But I did not somehow come to that conclusion, despite the fact that encore was saving a lot of my games. Sadly though, I got a lot of panic, and at around 1 o'clock in the morning, after a few glasses of wine, I was like, oh my god, I need to change Salazzle, I'm gonna fucking lose. So I ended up actually almost changing that, and I forgot to make the team for it, but I almost actually ended up changing that specifically to the Dragonite we see here. With Tailwind over my Dragon Dance, this would have been the Dragonite I was throwing on. I asked Marcos with no context, hey, should I throw on Tailwind on my Dragonite and just throw on Dragonite over Talonflame? And he said, sure, sounds like a great idea. Then as I was preparing for the Dragonite, I was about ready to actually EV it because I had a lot of money from vitamin dumping. And I was quite literally about to put the final investment in. And he's like, wait, what's your team? I showed him my team. He's like, and he didn't know what to think. He told me not to run it. So ultimately, I ended up actually just asking ChatGPT a lot of different times. And they told me Dragonite still. And then I panicked and I was like, nope, I cannot go with Dragonite. I'm going to lose if I go Dragonite, and I think it would be really bad if I made such a massive team change when I have practiced none of my sets with it. So I went with Talonflame because at least I had practiced sets with it, and it was the most standard mon I felt comfortable with. I threw on Overheat onto this to try and fix my Dozo issue, because one of the biggest reasons actually for this was because it not only pressures bulk of Corviknight a bit better, and this is why I went with it over Flare Blitz specifically. It pressures bulk of Corviknight a bit better. I don't take recoil, which is huge, and that allows me to keep Galewind's priority later on, which is valuable actually as fuck. But not only that, but the biggest thing here was because Overheat does not actually care about unaware Dozo, because I just keep clicking it and clicking it and clicking it, and Dozo is such a low speed F stat, this actually does significantly more damage than Flare Blitz would anyway against almost every Dozo. This was really helpful actually in my team, and I think it was actually the biggest savior. While I never really cared about clicking it for Steel Dozo, because the Steel Dozo team I fought also had a Garganackle on it round 1, and I don't know how I pulled that matchup round 1. I think I just spoke it into existence, but I went 0-3 went from that one to losing to Ashton Cox's mother, which was really incredible to get to play. She played incredible and was unironically my best resistance of the whole day. But then I played a Bronzong Trick Room team that I couldn't actually break Bronzong on. Despite Overheat Talonflame being on this team, it was actually like a 3-hit KO, which was really bad. 3-hit KO, of course, after the special attack drop set is, but my team couldn't really pressure Bronzong, and in my game 3, sadly, I got a little bit unfortunate with hitting moves to where it did end up putting me to 0-3. Still a great exhibition, of course. It was really a great set, and the team was really cool. Seeing Bronzong actually perform that well, it's a mon that I always think will do well, and then never actually see a lot of usage for, but I think that Bronzong might unironically have a place. And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing if Bronzong can do well in future series. My opponent did not do well with it, but I do think there's still a place for it. Moving on to my game 4, though, I was about to forfeit and just drop the whole game, but Marcos is doing well, a couple of my other friends are doing well. All undefeated are like 2-1, besides one specific person. In fact, no, actually, everyone in my group was positive at the time. So I decided I would stick out until they were deciding to leave. I figured maybe they would lose soon, but then I won. I won my game 4. I won my game 5. I kept going and going. This Overheat Talonflame actually proved to be one of the biggest reasons I won, because there was a Terra Steel Fluttermane matchup I actually was super worried about, but thankfully, when the Terra Steel happened, I was able to overheat it. So this actually came into a huge play because I was able to actually take out the Terra Steel Fluttermane that way. So I'm really glad I made the choice, because I think I would have lost otherwise, to be completely honest, because the overheat was really safe, specifically for just trying to pressure that slot. But overall, I think that the biggest success in this team actually came down to the Abomasnow. I think it was the game changer that really opened up a lot of my opportunities. And with the Abomasnow plus Garchomp, I was actually kicking ass. I think it was truly one of my best ways of winning games with these two as endgame mons. But not only that, but Garchomp Bundle was an incredible lead, and it was something that I didn't really even think of until the actual event. But Garchomp Bundle won me a lot of games. Specifically, my leads that I actually ended up using, despite not playing them in prep, were either Talonflame Garchomp, Bundle Garchomp, Bundle on a Fluttermane Garchomp, or Fluttermane and Bundle. I did like one game where I led off with Talonflame Fluttermane, but these four essentially were pretty interchangeable for leads. I brought Abomasnow in the back for almost all my sets, and weirdly enough, King Gambit was probably one of my least brought mons. It was either King Gambit or Talonflame, I'm not sure which, but they were both pretty close to that back slot. I think that my team adapted into a pseudo hail team, and I'm really proud of how my run went. Now, obviously, there's only a few more days in the format, but I'm hoping that obviously the bridge of progression to how I got to this team will be valuable for maybe someone in terms of how I came to my spreads, or at the very least how Paul and I came to spreads, or even just how Paul came to spreads, or even just seeing how I ended up obviously adapting this team into really what it became, and just seeing the progression that allows you to get to a really good team, and how even just ideas that you disregard at first could be cycled back to you, such as the Dragonite, for example. But hopefully it helps someone. I don't know who it's specifically going to help, but if it helps someone with their teams for Regulation C, that would be great. Maybe you saw an idea here that you want to try, and let me know if you do down below. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on that as well. And I'm going to do a showcase for the team tomorrow, because I think it would be very fitting to end off the series with this. Well, not technically end off, there's still gonna be a few more days. I do have a few more teams lined up that I'm gonna be trying. I have someone who has already said they're gonna looking to get me a rental code, who actually met at the event. By the way, shoutouts to, of course, I believe the username was Maddie Takes or Maddie Talks. I'm Maddie Taxes. Sorry, I butchered it the first couple times, but I actually got to play a subscriber in my round 6 game. Really incredible getting to play you. You were the first subscriber I actually met at a regional who I did not fly out there with. So it was really obviously great to, of course, get to meet a fan of the channel. I met another fan of the channel as well, who at the time of round 6 was actually 5-1. Their only loss actually at the time was, funny enough, to Moxie, who I was there with, and we were actually watching the stream game for at the time. But it was really cool getting to, of course, meet a couple subscribers and fans of the channel. And if you guys end up coming out to the next regional I end up going to, of course, I would love to get to meet more of you guys. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed and you want to see some more content like this, of course, like and subscribe. Shoutouts to all of the channel members, of course, on the content, being Josh K Ultra Player, Mia, Zeke Zero, Matt O'Shea, Bbat, Anna Duper, Timo Mueller, and Fonzie. Your guys' support is greatly appreciated. We're gonna have the members video going up on Friday, where we're gonna be using nothing in the top 50 for hitting Master Ball. So hopefully you guys enjoy that, and I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, peace out, guys.